When given the equation of a sine function, you can find all the characteristics of that sine function using these formulas. You can find the amplitude, the period, the frequency, the phase shift, and the vertical shift. And it's really just a matter of doing a little bit of arithmetic. And so I'm just going to show you how to do each of these given just one formula. So let's take a look at how to do that. So if we're given this function, f of x equals negative 1/4 sine quantity negative 1/2 x minus pi over 6 plus 4, let's find the amplitude, period, frequency, phase shift, and vertical shift. I made a list here of each of the formulas. If you just jot those down somewhere and keep them handy, then they'll be easy for quick reference whenever you need to do a problem such as this. And as long as you know where everything is within your formula, then you're good to go. Now remember, in your formula, here is your A, your B, your C, and your D. Maybe sometimes it helps to label each thing for quick reference. So let's start with amplitude. Amplitude is the absolute value of A. So here is your A. So if I want amplitude, I want absolute value of negative 1/4. So my amplitude in this problem is going to be positive 1/4. So no real sorcery there. That was just pretty easy to do. Period is going to be 2 pi over the absolute value of B. Now, this B is actually, there's a 1 in front of that x there. So B is actually, this is actually looks like this, negative 1/2 x. So my B here is actually negative 1/2. So we're going to solve for B here. We're going to say 2 pi, period, is equal to 2 pi over absolute value of negative 1/2. So we're going to have to say 2 pi over 1/2. So whenever we divide by a fraction, we're actually going to invert that fraction and multiply. So we're going to say 2 pi over 1 times 2 over 1, because we're going to flip this fraction right here and we're going to multiply by it. So that's actually going to be this times this and this times this, and we're going to get 4 pi. So there's our period. Our period is 4 pi. Now frequency, super easy. Don't have to do anything at all there except put this under a 1. So it's 1 over 4 pi. So the period for this, or the frequency for this function, is 1 over 4 pi. Phase shift in this case is going to be, or in each case, is negative c over absolute value of b. So phase shift is going to be negative c absolute value of b. Now, c is negative pi over 6. So we are saying a negative pi over 6. So it's really important to pay attention to those negative signs. Absolute value, negative 1/2. So you've got a lot of fractions over fractions here. So that can get a little treacherous if you're not careful with your fractions and your negative signs, but it's not too bad if you just keep everything written down carefully. So negative, negative, we've got a positive pi over 6, and an absolute value of negative 1/2 is positive 1/2. And remember, when we divide by a fraction, we multiply by its reciprocal. So we're going to flip it and multiply. So that's going to be 2 pi over 6. And that's going to reduce to 1/3, which is just pi over 3. Remember, the 1 is still there, but we don't write it. We just say pi over 3. So our phase shift is pi over 3. Our graph is shifted pi over 3 units off of the normal sine graph intercept of 0, 0. Now vertical shift, how much did we shift up or down? That's our D value. Again, we don't have to do any kind of calculation there. It's just what's sitting at D. So D is 4. We shifted 4 units up. And that is all we have to do when we want to read our values, our characteristics of our sine graph out of the equation.